This is Richard Oppenheimer, interim president of the West Side Democrats. And this is another in our ongoing series of forums. And I am incredibly excited. We as a club are incredibly excited to be hosting this forum tonight. And we are thrilled that Joan Paylo, our incredible district leader from the 69th, will be moderating this coming forum, and to Pablo Zevallos for the later and your constant support of helping to ensure that this goes smoothly. So I'm excited, and I'm going to begin with a concern. New York City's pension fund is the fourth largest in the nation and elemental to the fiscal health of the city during these dire times. It's bedrock of profound import to city employees, retirees, and really to the citizenry. And yes, there's going to be an exciting pipeline, hopefully to New York, with the support of the incoming majority leader, our own Chuck Schumer. Of import in the dealing with the pensions is how they are invested. Our current city controller, Scott Stringer, invested in green energy, divested in fossil fuel, and so these issues of critical concern to the fiscal health of the city and to the progress in the future of the city of New York are of serious import to the West Side Democrats, and we look forward to hearing from you on these and other concerns. Thank you. Joan?
Well, thanks, Richard. I think you asked all the questions. We have some really good questions.
Well, thank you for having me tonight.
Okay, so my introduction was similar. In these perilous times, we're grateful that we live in the strong blue bubble of New York City, with Jerry as Judiciary Chair and new Majority Leader Chuck and others to guard our interests and principles. So the people that we elect in these upcoming November city elections must be of the intellectual and personal caliber to carry us through to better times. And last year, West Side Dems endorsed our current city controller, Scott Stringer, as you know, for mayor for good reason. And after 8 years, Scott leaves some big shoes to fill. So we Upper West Siders have some big questions about how we can live long and prosper. So our first candidate, State Senator David Weprin, will introduce himself and then take questions. Senator Weprin.
Yeah, thank you, Joan. I'm just going to make a little modification. It's actually Assemblyman, but
oh, I'm sorry.
I've been called a lot of things, and I'm not insulted by being called senator. I'm still called councilman or council member because I did serve in the city council for 8 years. But I'm really excited about this election. This is a very tough time, as we all know, and as we pointed out in the history of the city of New York. This is probably the worst fiscal crisis we have ever been in and will be in for many years to come. The good news, I guess, as was pointed out by Richard, is the incoming majority leader in the Senate, our own Chuck Schumer, and of course, President Biden. So there's some hope about getting federal aid, but it's not going to be enough. And it's really not going to get us through this in and of itself. So we certainly will have to band together and do everything. I'm running for controller because I come from a family that's committed to public service. My late father was a public servant. He was an assembly member. He was involved in very progressive legislation before his time, before it was popular to be progressive. He actually passed the first LGBT rights bill in the legislature when he was speaker. And my mother is a Jewish immigrant from Cuba. She's going to be 91 in April. And she became a school teacher, a high school teacher, high school public school teacher, and was a proud UFT member. And she keeps asking me about her pension because she really relies on that pension and she wants to make sure that's preserved. So that is one of my priorities, to make sure that our pensioners are protected, and they will be. There are a lot of good things Scott has done, and I'm not going to take that away from him, but I have some ideas of my own as well. And I think I look forward to using the powers of the Comptroller's office to do progressive things, but primarily to do responsible investment of the pension funds. I'd like to expand the audit function to audit every city agency once a year, if that's possible. And right now, by the charter, every agency has to only be audited once every 4 years. So that's something I think we can expand. And I think we can do a lot of good progressive things through the audit function, find a lot of waste. And I'd also like to see more of the outside contracting budget. For example, the Department of Education has billions and billions of dollars of outside consultants that are really using the education budget improperly, in my opinion, because we really need the money for the teachers, for the students, for in-class services, and a lot of that waste that we can find in the city budget is in the outside contracting budget, whether it be the education department or the police department, because that's another large agency that has significant outside consultants. I feel I'm the only one that has extensive public and private sector relevant finance experience, having been chair of the finance committee of the city council for 8 years, having been deputy superintendent of banking for 4 years, and having a over 25-year municipal finance career with major Wall Street firms. And I'd love to have the endorsement of the West Side Democrats.
Thank you, David. We have some questions. The Comptroller is the chief investment officer safeguarding about $230 billion in municipal public pension funds. 7% return is mandated by law. In the 2020 fiscal year, our net gain was only 4.44%, and a number of other municipalities and states had similar problems. Can you explain this, and how will you pull us out of the hole? You said it would take a while in your introduction. So what's going to happen? What will you do? Correct.
Well, I think we have to really bring together a blue ribbon commission. We have to get everybody involved. It's similar to 1975, although worse. I think we need the fiscal experts. I think we need to bring labor to the table. I think we need to put the private sector to work to help the city, to bail us out. There's so many things we have to do, but we can't do it in a vacuum. You can't, one individual can't do it, no matter who that individual is. And I would hope I would bring all the resources to save New York City together. But certainly federal aid is certainly part of it. It's Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who chaired the Finance Committee in the Senate, used to do an annual report every year saying how much New York City and New York State contribute to the federal government versus what they get back in services. I think it's time for payback to equal the ledger. And now is the time with Senator Schumer, who knows this well, as our Senate Majority Leader, and President-elect Biden as our president. I think we are in a position to kind of reverse that ledger that took place for many years against New York City and New York State.
Thank you, David. I froze a little bit, so I missed some of your answer, but I think I grasped most of it. Housing is a cornerstone of the West Side Democrats' mission. In his State of the State address on Monday, Governor Cuomo mentioned the idea of converting now underused office buildings into housing. Have you considered this idea, and what other plans do you have to calm our housing crisis?
Well, there's no question we need affordable housing throughout the city. And I would take all ideas, certainly the idea of using underutilized hotels due to the pandemic, but we want to bring back hotels as well at one point, using unused office buildings, all good ideas. There's no question. We can also, there's a program that the Comptroller's office has, ETI it's called, Economically Targeted Investments. And it's up to 2% of the budget, but when you're dealing with a $230 billion pension fund, 2% is a large amount. And there's no question that we can use a good deal of that money to build affordable housing. And that certainly will be a priority for me with that economically targeted investment.
Okay, you had said that you were head of the Council Finance Committee, I believe,
Correct.
after 9/11. Do you see any parallels?
Absolutely. Actually, I see parallels to 1975 fiscal crisis, to post 9/11 fiscal crisis, and the 2008 recession fiscal crisis, except that this is going to be worse than all of them put together. That's how bad this situation is going to be, just because of the pandemic and trying to bring everybody back. Obviously, we've got to get everybody a vaccine as soon as possible. That should be a priority. But once we get, herd immunity and things start to trickle back to normal, there's no question that we all have to band together. So this is a fiscal crisis, and I was very proud of my record as chair of the Finance Committee. When I came in, we had a multi-billion-dollar deficit after 9/11, and I didn't singly do it, but I was a part of that solution to become a deficit. And then we had another multi-billion-dollar deficit when after the 2008 recession, and we turned that into a surplus before I left as chair of the Finance Committee in the end of 2009. So I'm proud of that record, and I hope to not just do this alone, but really bring everybody together to bail out New York City.
Right, we have such a brief time. Maybe this is the last question. I'd like to talk to you for half an hour, but Governor Cuomo has given municipalities and local police agencies until April 1st to present a detailed plan for police reform and reinvention or lose state funding. What is your idea for dividing our limited city budget for a new community-based vision of public safety? And what's your comment on defunding the police?
Well, I'm not a supporter of defunding the police. I'm certainly a supporter of using police resources differently and having better community relations and mental health training, and even using mental health professionals, dealing with police type issues. So, I think when you talk about defunding the police, at one point, that could jeopardize crime, and crime has already, been spiking up. Gun violence in particular has been spiking up, and who are the victims? It's minority neighborhoods and minority communities that are really the ones that are becoming the victims, of gun violence. And it's clearly mostly Black and brown individuals that are involved in the gun violence and being shot. So I'd be very hesitant to make a major cut in actual police personnel, but I think it can be, reallocated and used more efficiently. We need more mental health professionals and training. We need more community policing, more, police dealing with the community in positive ways. So, that's how I feel.
We hear the phrases millionaire tax and commuter tax thrown around a lot. Could you comment on what these mean to you and the likelihood of each or either being enacted?
Well, actually, I've had a commuter tax.
Seconds left for a brief answer, please.
How many seconds?
About 30 seconds for a brief answer, please.
I've had two
Take a little
commuter-
time. Go on.
I've had many
Answer.
commuter tax bills in the assembly since I'm there in 2010. Now is the time to bring back the non-resident income tax. It's a fair tax. It's a progressive tax. It's a tax for people that get all the services of New York City, but live outside the city. So I think now is the time to bring back the commuter tax. I'm glad you asked that question, because I said that in an op-ed piece in the Gotham Gazette over the summer. And I also advocated for the new taxes that Governor Cuomo just proposed yesterday in that same op-ed piece of a marijuana tax and legalizing marijuana, and an online sports betting tax.
All right, thank you. David, do you have anything, a couple sentences to summarize anything that you said?
Yes, I really feel that at this point in time, I can use my background and experience. And again, 8 years as chair of the Finance Committee of the City Council, 11 years in Albany, where I've actually chaired the Corrections Committee for the last 5 years, and been involved in every criminal justice reform measure that we adopted in the Assembly, and some very progressive and forward-looking legislation. And I would be proud to have the endorsement of the West Side Democrats.
All right, thanks for coming to Manhattan, David.
Thank you.
We'll see you on the trail. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I could have sworn, by the way, you had a great holiday party. I was happy to participate in that, and very impressed by the turnout you had of so many people, including our Senate Majority Leader to be.
I wish that Chuck had like broken some big story, but he did not. So anyway, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right, Pablo, is Brad up next? Yes, huh?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Brooklyn City Councilman, I hope I have that office correct. Brad Lander, welcome, Brad. We have so many questions that we may not re-ask some of the important ones, but they're all important. Westside Dems President Richard Oppenheimer says that union retirees expect the next comptroller to lead in investing in green energy and divesting in fossil fuel, as Comptroller Stringer has begun to do. How can the comptroller use green energy to preserve, protect, and grow the city pension fund? And are there some drawbacks to totally dropping the fossil fuel companies?
Thank you so much, Joan and Richard, for that question, and to all the West Side Democrats for the opportunity to speak with you. I really feel lucky and grateful to be here and be with so many old friends. As New York City Comptroller, I'll pioneer a strategic plan for responsible investing that makes sure we can guarantee the retirement security for our teachers and nurses and public sector workers, and balance that with our values and our future. So yes, I completely agree with Scott. We need to divest from fossil fuels. It's already a bad investment to be in coal, and it's going to be in extractive fossil fuels soon. But we can go further than that. In addition to divesting from fossils, you can use shareholder activism and proxy resolutions to push banks and utilities and tech companies to set ambitious fossil fuel reductions in their own companies. And that's something that's just getting started now, but we've got a really big way to go. And of course, invest in renewable energy, in rooftop solar. I've got a proposal to use a combination of city capital and pension fund investments to radically scale up rooftop solar in New York City in a way that will support affordable housing buildings, but also pay a return for the city. We can have that balance. You need to do it smart. That's why a strategic plan, that's why a great chief investment officer that I'll hire are essential, because balancing, our future requires both things. It requires retirement security and it requires climate security, and we've got to work together to get them.
Brad, I didn't give you a chance to introduce yourself and give us your background. You could do that now if you want.
I'm happy to say a few opening words, but I was also happy to jump in and start answering your questions. So you tell me.
Go on.
All
I'm not sure what your background is, so.
All right, that's good.
Don't
I know a
trust the
lot of folks here,
website,
but
right.
not everyone. So thank you, Joan and the West Side Democrats, for this great opportunity to speak. First, I want to say a big thank you to everyone on this call who organized to help Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff win in Georgia. Grassroots organizing, much of it led by Black women, made those wins possible. And at this really scary time, give us a fighting chance on so many urgent things that matter. I love being here with you. I love the strong organizing tradition that your newly combined club has nurtured. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about why I'm running for New York City Comptroller in the hard and important years ahead. Before I entered politics, I had a 15-year career running two great nonprofits, the Fifth Avenue Committee and the Pratt Center, that supported community-based planning, neighborhood preservation, and affordable housing in all 5 boroughs, including on the Upper West Side. And for the past 10 years, I've served in the City Council, where I've passed legislation to create strong tenant protections, hold reckless drivers accountable, help fast food workers win a fair work week, protect freelancers from wage theft, guarantee a living wage for Uber and Lyft drivers, and ban plastic bags. I brought participatory budgeting to New York City, strengthened our campaign finance laws, and passed the toughest disclosure law in the country for independent expenditures. And in all that work, I've combined working closely with community leaders like you, with taking a good hard look at the data to win systems change that makes government work better. And that's the approach we're going to need for the daunting challenge we face of securing a just and durable recovery in the days ahead, to help millions of struggling families who can't pay the rent, to save our beloved small businesses and rebuild our city's economy. We face a severe budget crisis that requires making hard choices, and I've made those hard choices as a member of the council, but we also need to invest in the long-term rebuilding for our city. In past crises, our leaders pioneered investments in the subways, CUNY, Mitchell-Lama, that set the platform for future success, and we can and must do the same today.
Okay,
But all that requires, sorry?
Let us ask you some questions.
Okay, great. All right, I'm excited to answer your questions.
Okay. Your campaign website talks about how the comptroller can play a role in what you call traffic violence. Can you comment on your thinking behind this, and how the narrowing and closing of streets to restaurants and recreation can further congest and pollute our other roadways? And one thing that a lot of us becoming seniors on the Upper West Side worry about is, why not require bicyclists to pay a few dollars for licenses as dog owners do?
Thank you. I have to say, you guys are the first club that has read the websites and asked questions grounded in our plans, which is very expected from the West Side Democrats. So I just want to give you kudos for it. Look, my work on reckless driving grows from very personal experience. You know, I know a lot of you knew Cooper Stock and his family. I knew Sammy Cohen Eckstein, who was a member of my synagogue and who I knew from the time he was born. So when he was killed at age 12, it just like broke all our hearts. And then we had this horrible crash in the neighborhood where a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old were killed. And it caused me to dig in and say, what are we doing to combat reckless driving? And to find our current approach is not working. Like, this is a case where police officers who are out there, like occasionally with a speed gun, they don't go to the academy to write traffic tickets. So they don't combat reckless driving effectively. And what we learned quickly, especially from that crash here in the neighborhood that killed Abigail and Joshua, was the speed cameras and the red light cameras point us to the most terribly reckless drivers in the city. The driver that killed them was in the top 1% of most reckless drivers in the city, based on data we already had. And so that's the core insight in my plan, is to use the data we have to go and find, we know who those most reckless drivers are, who are most likely to cause harm and injure or kill our loved ones and our neighbors, and say to them, you have to change the way you drive. We're going to give you an opportunity to do so. But if you can't, we're not going to be able to let you keep your license and keep your car, because you can't drive it like a weapon aimed at your neighbors. And these people, if you look at the data, are just insanely reckless. So what I've laid out, and you can see it on my website, is a plan for a much smarter use of the data we have to target the most reckless drivers and get them to either change their behaviors or get them off our streets before they injure or kill our loved ones.
And how does the comptroller's office, that seems something that the city council or the mayor's office or something would do, but I just can't let you pass up my idea that if every cyclist had to get a license, we would collect a whole bunch of money and help our pensioners.
Well, so on your question about how it's the job of the controller, two answers. First, that whole policy is grounded in a use of city data that no one was making. We had all this data about who the reckless drivers were and nobody was looking at it. And my office looked at it and said, we could do it better. That's what those audits are. And if I have the audit power, what I'm going to do is make really smart use of the data we have, of talking to New Yorkers to find value, and whether that's saving money or saving lives, that's what you want out of audits. The second thing, and it's also in that platform, is that the second largest form of claims that the city pay out, first largest are for police misconduct. And I'd love to talk about that if we have time, because I've got some plans there. But the second largest are for crashes caused by city drivers. And no one has taken a look and said, what can we do to reduce those crashes? Again, it'll save lives, but it'll also save money. Yeah.
You mentioned you wanted to talk about, I guess, the new restructuring of public safety and the police. Did you just say you wanted to speak about that?
Oh, well, they're your questions, so you decide what to ask. I'm happy to answer whatever the questions. It's certainly an area that's important, and if you want to talk about it, I will. But I defer to your questions.
Well, I would like to hear your answer to that. Alec, how much time do we have?
90 seconds left.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm curious, Brad. I know that Scott had a huge number of offices before he became comptroller, but he didn't have a finance background per se. And you're the only one of the candidates, I believe, who does not have like a financial degree and finance experience per se. Could you explain how you intend to conquer the office?
Definitely. So first, I've done a lot of work relative to finance. I built and financed affordable housing at the Fifth Avenue Committee. I ran 2 nonprofits where I had to raise money, have budgets, have audits, hire auditors, make sure we were on sound financial footing. And I've now been through 10 city budgets, some of them in really hard times. I brought participatory budgeting to New York City. I've been the council's strongest champion for reforming capital projects management. I probably dug my elbows into the capital budget deeper than almost any city council member. I've got a whole set of ideas for how we can reform capital projects management. And finally, what you want in this job is somebody who hires good people, because you need to hire a chief investment officer, you need to hire a chief accountant, you need to hire that chief auditor to achieve accountability. You want someone who knows how to make government work well, yes, who knows their way around a balance sheet, but whose core skill is at working together with all New Yorkers to shine a spotlight on government and make it work better for us. And I really think that those are the skills that I've developed in my time in office.
Is that it, Alec?
I think that's all the time we have.
Oh, I'm so sorry, because we have so much more to talk about. All right.
Can I have a few seconds for closing as
Sure.
David had? Or?
Certainly.
All right, thank you. First, it sounds like Joan and Richard have been on my website, but I hope others will go to landerfornyc.com, because you'll see policies there to combat climate change, deal with reckless driving. We've got a great new policy coming for rebooting the Mitchell-Lama program so that we can have shared equity home ownership for a whole new generation of New Yorkers. And I'm proud to have a great and growing coalition, including the support of your amazing Congressmember Jerry Nadler, former Manhattan Borough President Ruth Messenger, the Working Families Party, the Communications Workers, UAW, Freelancers Union. I'm the only candidate in the race not taking real estate donations, and the only one who has received public matching funds so far. So if you're looking for a candidate who will really work together with you to invest in our democracy and rebuild our city with a just and durable recovery, I hope I have your vote for controller, and I'm really, really grateful for the chance to talk with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilmember Lander. Pablo, are we okay?
We're doing great. We're doing great so far.
All right. Our third candidate then, and thank you for your help, Alec. Alec's my co-leader in the 69th AD, Part B. Brooklyn State Senator Kevin Parker. Where are you, Kevin? There you are. You said something nice about your opponent when David came on, so I'm impressed. All right. This comes from Stephanie Pinto, one of Community Free Democrats, past presidents, who worked in Jay Golden's office. The Office of the Comptroller can have a serious impact on corporate boards through the city's vast portfolio. Studies indicate that companies perform better with a more diverse board, and Scott was instrumental at getting some corporations to achieve this. How would you continue this on a macro and a micro scale to push for policies that are more equitable for societies at home and abroad?
Well, first, let me thank you all for giving me this opportunity to present in front of you today. Again, I'm State Senator Kevin Parker. I represent the 21st District in Brooklyn. I'm the chairman of the Energy and Telecommunications Committee in the Senate, as well as the Majority Whip. And let me certainly say good evening to Brad Lander, who's actually one of the city councilmen. We share a district in Park Slope. And I've been telling people all the time that I think that this pool of candidates is top notch. And certainly have a lot of respect for David, Brad and Brian, and I've enjoyed and learned a lot just from this process of going around the city, and I think so much of Brad Lander that I think we should keep him in the city council, find a way to keep him there another 3 years or 4 years. Right.
I'm sorry. Again, I forgot to ask you to introduce yourself and give us your background, but answer Stephanie's question first.
Yeah. So the answer to Stephanie's question is that I am just terribly committed to diversity. It's been, again, part of my stock and trade. The 18 years I've served in the state Senate has been part of the work I've done. Even now, appointing people to the ISO, the system operator, and the PSC and other boards of trying to kind of continue to do that. So I'm committed to that. I think that it's a process of both having that conversation overtly, but also working with them to find candidates that fit the boards to do that work. I think that the work of diversity also has to do with the money managers. Blacks, Latinos, Asians, and women represent less than 2% of those who are managing the money in the pension fund. I don't think that's right. I don't think and I think that we're losing an opportunity to bring wealth into communities that really need it, particularly in the context of this pandemic. And so I'm committed to it. I'll continue to work towards it.
How would you find those people? This is on a national level. It is New York City, where everybody has to pass through and everyone knows everyone. But how would you find some of those people?
Well, I think I would find them the way I find them all the time. You work through professional organizations, the Metropolitan Black Bar, National Association of Black Accountants, fraternities, sororities, Masonic organizations, churches, right? The Boule. There's tons of organizations, and those are just and both African American, Latino, and Asian organizations all have people that they can put forward, and that's kind of what I've done. I've worked with, NWCP, the Urban League, and so you get candidates. And then there's some areas in which, because I've worked in these fields for such a long time, having worked on Wall Street at Payne Weber, having worked in the State Controller's office under Carl McCall, and 18 years in the Senate, my Rolodex is ample. And so some folks I just have relationships with, and we'll continue to lean on those relationships to build the work of our great city.
Thank you. It's the first time in a long time I've heard the word Rolodex. I remember what that means. But I like that. My Rolodex is ample because your website says that you are known for your intellectualism. I'm not quite sure how many syllables that is, but it impressed me. Of the approximately 200,000 NYCHA apartments, and this comes from Stephanie too, a minimum of 10% of the apartments about that were vacant for a multiplicity of reasons. Would there be continuing audits of NYCHA in terms of the actual needed level of funding and efficiency of operation and accountability on how and where funds are spent?
Joan, thanks for asking that question. I think it's a great question. I'm actually born and raised in NYCHA. I grew up in the Bushwick Projects in Brooklyn. So NYCHA has been a particular concern of mine. As a member of the state legislature, we don't do nearly enough. Just to put it in context, if NYCHA was its own city, it'd be the second largest city in the entire state of New York, right? Outside of New York City. And so it really is an undervalued, and underused resource in that way. It would take probably about $18 billion to kind of get it where it needs to get to. And so certainly I think that along with probably a lot of my colleagues believe that NYCHA needs a management order badly. They kind of are not efficient, don't seem to use money well, and have not done a great job at garnering resources and putting them where they need to go. And so that certainly will be one of my focuses. If I get the endorsement of this club and move on to become your next city controller.
All right, commenting on the small business crisis in our city, Harlem restaurant owner and chef Melba Wilson reports that 80% of restaurants haven't paid their rent in months, and 234,000 restaurant jobs have disappeared. Yet 6,000 laws constrain small businesses and labor lawyers are unaffordable. I know you guys in the Comptroller's office need to collect fees and fines and all that, but how can the Comptroller help our mom and pops get back on their feet?
Well, actually, I think this is an actual critical part, and I think that Melba Williams is Brian Benjamin's constituent in her business. Melba's is in his district, but is one of my favorite eating spots. And in fact, after I win the election, I'm gonna take Brian and the rest of the crew over there for a great meal. I'm gonna even pay. But this has been absolutely a big deal and a part of how we're gonna need to rebuild our city. We're going to need to get another stimulus or two from the federal government. We're going to need to tax the ultra millionaires in order to get some revenue. But long term, we're going to need to build back this city by creating full-time jobs at a living wage with benefits. And it's through small businesses that we do that. We have an economy that's moved from Wall Street to Main Street. And the main streets of our city are going to need to get both the technical assistance and access to capital. So there's a restaurants bill in the federal government that I think will help bail them out. But I think beyond that, we're going to need to come up with both some resources and I think some foregoing of taxes and those kind of things in order to make sure that our small businesses, particularly the restaurants, get what they need. New York City has more restaurants than any other city per capita in the world, except for Paris. And it becomes the backbone of a lot of the work and a lot of the workers that we have. And so, New Yorkers need a hand up, not a hand out. And it's really building these small businesses that's going to make a difference in how New York gets to a place in which we all feel comfortable living again.
Alec, how are we doing on time?
2 minutes left.
2 minutes? Okay. Kevin, I just wanted to remark when you talked about sororities and looking for people through sororities, that Stacey Abrams actually got her national support when she was running for state office from her sorority.
Right.
We know West Sider Joyce Johnson's a member of it, knew Stacey forever. So that's an interesting point. There's some good people out there. All right, so let me ask you, how would you work with unions to reduce costs to the city during our recovery? That's from our district leader, Josh.
Josh, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I come from a union household. Actually, my father began his career as a AFL-CIO union organizer. In the 50s, joined TWU Local 100 and was a member of Transit for 30 years. My mother worked at Brooklyn College and was a worker at DC 37. And I'm even, my brother now works for Local 371, which is part of DC 37. And I'm a member of PSC CUNY as a CUNY adjunct professor at Brooklyn College and John Jay, Mega Evers, and others. And so, collaboratively, particularly working on the pension funds, but certainly they should be part of the conversation that we have about how the city gets back. One of the first things I'll do is create an economic justice council, and it'll be full of union leaders, corporate leaders, clergy leaders, community leaders to help come up with a plan to, bring our city back. And so in every step of the way, it is my expectation. This way I've done things as a state senator, I will continue to work collaboratively with the labor unions and make sure that the hard men and women who take care of the city have a stake in its rebuilding.
Alec, do we have time?
I think just for closing remarks.
Okay, would you mind making some closing remarks, Senator?
I would not, Joan. So first of all, let me say thank you to the West Side Democrats for this opportunity to present in front of you. Again, I'm State Senator Kevin Parker. I'm looking to be your next city controller. If I get your endorsement, that takes me very far on making that a reality. I'm looking forward to working with all of you to do the things that we need to do for everyday New Yorkers, to build small businesses, to make sure that our pension fund makes money, but simultaneously is responsible and reflects the needs and the values of New Yorkers, to build both supportive housing and workforce housing so that everybody can afford to live here, and to make sure that our young people are invested in. And so, you know, I'm hoping that I get your endorsement. I'm looking forward to our work together, and only together are we going to get through this. So thanks you so much. Enjoy.
Right. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Pablo, are we up for Brian Benjamin now?
That's right. Senator Benjamin is next.
I usually call him Brian, but I will say Senator Benjamin of Manhattan. You are next. If you'd like to give a brief, because we've got a lot of questions, a brief introduction to your background, we'd appreciate that.
Well, first of all, thank you to the West Side Democrats. I want to thank Joan, Alec, Richard, Pablo. You know, we've worked together for a number of years. Thank you for helping to get me elected to the New York State Senate. We worked together so hard to help elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and in Georgia, making phone calls. So it's been a pleasure. You know, I am a son of Harlem. Both of my parents are retirees from the labor movement. My mom, a secretary at DC 37. My dad, a janitor for Stuyvesant High School, for 32 BJ for my whole life, and they're both retired. I went to Catholic school, and then I went to Brown University. I majored in public policy, and Harvard Business School, where I majored in investment management. And I spent a lot of time, Joan, actually understanding and working in the private sector, managing assets. So I know portfolio diversification. I know asset allocation, which is an important part of the job to be the next comptroller. I also spent 7 years on my community board, where I helped fight luxury projects in my district in Central Harlem, and helped to lead the fight on SoHo. Many of you know about that whole effort where brokers are trying to rename Harlem SoHo. Well, I led the fight to stop that, and you know, when I joined the Senate, led the fight to help make sure that private prisons will no longer get state comptroller investment. And also, I'm presently in the fight to make sure that New York State chartered banks don't lend to private prisons. And so I bring all those experiences to the table as I look to run for New York City Comptroller.
Thank you, Brian. Here's a question. Although the show must go on, the near collapse of Broadway and the hotel, restaurant, and tourist industries that thrive around this entertainment mecca has been nothing short of disaster. And also, as I think you mentioned, workplace housing, the astronomical cost of housing for performers, writers, artists, and musicians who are young or old and dream of coming to this city. And the rent is prohibitive, the housing stock prohibitive. What role can the comptroller play in solving these problems? And they're going to have to be taken care of quickly.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, we need to ramp up our COVID vaccination process. We need to make sure that we have the right structures so that we can move this process along much quicker. We need Joe Biden to come in and enable the Defense Production Act so we can get a lot more vaccinations out, because that way we can help get the economy going again, and we can reopen Broadway, et cetera. But on the affordable housing piece, you raise a very important point. I believe, you know, given my background, I used to build affordable housing, Joan, that we have to have a comptroller who is willing to use some of that public pension money. Is $230 billion. Some of that has to go towards investing in affordable housing, but it has to be part of a strategic plan. I was on my community board, and as many people on community boards know, a lot of projects that come to the community boards are private sector driven. We need a public sector driven plan that says this is the amount of affordable housing needs we have across the city, and we need to have every community involved in a citywide affordable housing production plan. And the comptroller's office can play a very important role in using some of those assets to invest in that affordable housing. But we also need to deal with homeless housing as well, because for too long, the temporary temporary shelters are being used in a permanent way. It's way too expensive. We can invest We can look at some of these distressed hotels, we can purchase them, and we can provide, working with permanent supportive housing operators, provide permanent supportive housing at a much lower cost. But we've got to have a plan that's more driven, Joan, strategically around the need, as opposed, and then sort of building that need as opposed to the other way around, which is what we have now.
And so by investing in housing, then people make more income, pay more taxes, there's more business involved in that. And is that how the comptroller pays back to the pension fund what has been invested? I know if you invest in Exxon, you get money back really, regularly, but.
Absolutely. No, so the way it would work is that the comptroller will be part of the upfront investment within these, whether it's nonprofits or for-profits, whatever the structures that actually produce the affordable housing. But what is needed to do that first is we need a citywide zoning plan that is only devoted to affordable housing. There's too much public subsidy and abatement support that's going towards the building of private housing, of luxury housing. It needs to only go towards affordable housing, and the income targets that we know are so desperately needed. We need to build that production, and the comptroller's office can help invest in that to help turbocharge it. So that's the approach, but it's got to start first from a plan. We know we need over 600,000 units of affordable housing. We know we need it at the $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 increment levels. We know what we need. We just don't have a plan to get there. And I think if you have a plan to get there, then the comptroller could be a part of that investment. And I'd like to have the comptroller's audit office do an audit of the city's need for affordable housing to really kind of lay this out and then be part of the plan to make it happen.
So Senator, would you convince the city's vast real estate industry to help in our recovery?
I believe that the first part of the recovery is dealing with COVID. We've got to get the vaccinations to everyone. Number two, I believe that the vast real estate industry and just those who have resources need to help pay philanthropically for a number of issues where the city can't afford right now. For example, we have a number of students all over New York City who don't have access to devices, don't have adequate broadband. We're not handling workforce development. There's absolutely no reason why we're not leaning on everyone to be involved in that. And at the same time, we need the wealthiest amongst us to pay their fair share in taxes as well. And I think that I'm chair of the Budget and Revenues Committee, and we are looking at a range of options to present to help us balance this budget. But fortunately, we have a new president and vice president, and we have control of the Senate, and we have control of the House. So we expect to have some real resources coming. So that should be all part of the plan to help us get to where we need to go.
Right, Alec, what's our time like?
2 minutes, 45 seconds.
Oh, that's a long time. I used to work in radio. You could say a lot. Okay, you now serve a diverse district that includes Central Harlem, Park West Village, and Central Park West. All have a large senior population. Aside from getting the COVID-19 vaccine as soon as possible without walking and standing for long periods of time, people are messaging me, how can seniors get it without, having to stand in line and catch it or whatever? What do you see as the perennial needs of seniors that the comptroller can meet?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and thank you for that. I think the comptroller's office, we do a range of things. One is there's a number of retirees who are seniors. We need to make sure that the pension funds are managed in a way that they can continue to live in dignity. Both of my parents are retired with pensions, and I can tell you, my father had glaucoma. My mom was able to take care of him because both of them are retired on pensions. So that's the first order of business that the comptroller needs to do. And then I think, we need to look at health and hospitals, and we need to make sure that, we are delivering to our seniors all of the supports that they need so that they can live in dignity and security. And I believe that the comptroller can help focus on that through audits.
All right, and what about the millionaire tax and commuter tax? What are your comments on something like that? What are their likelihood of being enacted?
I I believe very strongly that we can do a millionaire's tax. I've been leading the team in the Senate that has been reviewing a number of the options. That is an option that is seriously on the table. It's the right thing to do, and we're looking very closely at that. One of the things that's important to understand in that process is that we do need to have three-way consent between us, the Assembly, and the governor. And what we have been doing now is been really evaluating how exactly do we do that, do the millionaire's tax. So, for example, at what rates do you raise the millionaire's tax? At what levels do you look at the numbers growing? Do you have a situation where you look at it retroactively? There's a number of things that are on the table that changes the amount of revenue that comes along with it. Do you do it alongside other revenue options? How do you think about the pied-à-terre tax and some other taxes? So we are trying to have a comprehensive plan that addresses sort of taxes. The commuter tax is one that has not been receiving a lot of support within the conference, but the millionaire's tax and some other taxes we're looking very closely at, and I believe will be part of our budget process this year.
And let me ask you one last question.
Maybe
You
Senator Benjamin.
mentioned the children and wireless internet access. What can the comptroller do for that?
And maybe Senator Benjamin can include closing remarks in this answer as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question, Joan. One of the things that the comptroller can do is provide transparency around what exactly is going on. There is too much that the public doesn't know, and I think if we can first describe what's going on, how many kids don't have access to devices, how many kids do not have access to broadband, and put that information on the table, then it creates the structure for which the city and outside forces can come and help address that problem. And that's the last thing I will say. I think the comptroller needs to do two things: safeguard the city's pensions and the retirees, and also safeguards the city's resources, root out waste, to make sure there's transparency and accountability around all resources. The NYPD has to be the top of the list because we want to make sure we have a city where people feel safe from each other, but also safe from the police. And as comptroller, I want to make sure that everyone has the adequate information so that I'm a bridge between the government and the people who want to be active on their own behalf. Donald Trump has created a society where we are so much more engaged, we're so much more interested, everyone wants to know what's going on. The comptroller is the key player in helping to provide that information. With a $70 million budget, over 700 staff members, we can make sure that the public knows what's going on and is empowered to be very active in its own democracy. And that's something that I look to do on your behalf.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much, Joan.
I think that's it. I want to thank Pablo and Alec for holding my hand through this, because I would run on for 4 hours if I could. These folks are very, very smart. They're very, very important issues, and we have a hard choice to make in our endorsements. So thank everybody for listening, and I'm going to turn it over to my co-leader Alec for the City Council to replace Mark Levine's.
I'll just also plug that as voters probably know, this election will use ranked choice voting. So in deciding your preferences for both comptroller and for city council, consider not just one candidate you support, but the order in which you will rank up to 5 candidates on your ballot. I don't think I'm actually moderating this segment, but Pablo, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Joan, for moderating a wonderful controller forum. Thank you, Alec, for timekeeping, and all of the candidates, of course, Assemblymember Weprin, Councilmember Lander, Senator Parker, and Senator Benjamin for being with us. My name is Pablo Zevallos. I'm a member of Westside Democrats, and I will be moderating our Council District 7 candidate forum. This is an exciting race because all of the candidates will be vying for an open seat. And so we'll be getting to hear from people looking to replace the incumbent, Mark Levine, who is term limited, and whom you heard from last week in our forum for Manhattan Borough President. So by way of background, here's the format. Candidates will have 3 minutes for opening statements. They will then have 6 minutes to answer questions. Those will not include, whatever minute or so I spend asking the questions and presenting it to candidates. And then we will keep going. We have many, many candidates joining us tonight. We're grateful for all of them for their participation. And just in the interest of time, let's get started. So first, we have Marti Allen-Cummings. Marti is a drag queen. They are a community board member, a Democratic activist, and I believe the first openly non-binary candidate for City Council, at least that we know of. So, Marti, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to give your opening remarks?
Yeah, thank you, Pablo, and thank you everyone for inviting me. And hello to my colleagues and friends who are also running for this seat. It's good to see all of you. Yeah, so my background in politics is not traditional. I've been a drag artist for my almost entire adult life, working in our small businesses across the city. And this has been a unique perspective, being a gig worker, living paycheck to paycheck, understanding that struggle that so many New Yorkers have faced and are facing at accelerated rates now because of the ongoing COVID pandemic, not knowing what to do at the first of the month when the bills are due. And this is something that this next council is really going to have to take on, is the recovery process, protecting our tenants, looking out for our small businesses, and having a recovery plan at the forefront of our platforms. I've been proud to serve on the community board. I serve on the Ali Forney Center for Homeless LGBTQIA+ Youths Board. And throughout the pandemic, we've been working to distribute PPE and masks, do trash cleanups, food distributions. I run a pantry out of my house for neighbors who are food insecure, because this is about coalition building and working together with our neighbors block by block, and having a city that's equitable for all New Yorkers, ensuring housing justice for all, ensuring that we have the resources our schools need, our teachers need, our students need, making sure we have a criminal justice system that is working for the people and working to end the school to prison pipeline, end mass incarceration, and end police brutality and aggression. And I also want to implement a Green New Deal, not just for our city as a whole, but for NYCHA and our public schools, to ensure that we are combating environmental justice at the local level, which can build long-term sustainable union jobs. I'm excited to meet with you. I'm excited to answer your questions. And like I said, it's a unique path to candidacy, being a drag artist, but we need unique and new voices at the governing table, and we need our community voices at the table as well. And so part of my job as a candidate, and hopefully as you're elected, is to bring your voice, your block with me into City Hall, so we can make sure we're putting bills through that are going to be the best for the most amount of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Marti, for your opening. So while I set the clock again, I'll be timekeeping as well. While we get started, I just wanted to start with our first question. So you may have heard this question at Urban Hamburg President Forum, but New York City has a proposal to engage in 5-year comprehensive planning to affirmatively plan for land use needs, which include affordable housing, but of course many other things as well, and to align them with our capital budget. And this would be an iterative process between community boards, the council, other stakeholders, and a new body altogether. Do you support or oppose this kind of proposal?
I think whenever we're talking about zoning or restructuring areas, this needs to be a community coalition. I know that there's a lot of conversation around the Morningside Heights, rezoning, where the zoning laws there haven't been changed, I think, since like 1961. So we need to have zoning have the community voices at the table, so the people who are going to be impacted are heard, their voices are heard. So I would support community coalitions and their voices being brought to the table whenever we're doing any kind of zoning legislation, because if it's going to impact community, that community's voice needs to be a part of that process.
Thank you for your answer to that question. My next question is about the Morningside Heights Community Coalition rezoning. Just for our viewers who may or may not be familiar, it's a rezoning plan put forth in Morningside Heights Community Coalition between 110th and 125th Streets, It would downzone along the side streets, upzone along the avenues, and place a mandatory inclusionary housing, which is to say an affordable housing set aside requirement for all new developments in the rezoning area. This plan has been rejected by the Department of City Planning, but of course has the support of a number of local officials and activists. Is this a plan that you support as a candidate?
Yeah, well, like I just said, I think it was, I think, it's like since 1961 or something that the zoning hasn't changed. So the current ruling with it is there would be no affordable housing. But we all know we need more affordable housing in this city. We need more mixed income housing in this city, especially when we're dealing with issues like COVID. People are struggling to pay their rent. They're struggling to pay their bills. We need to make sure that zoning is reflective of the community's needs. And so for me, that's like, I was so excited when I was reading how there's like 20 something different community organizations working together on this zoning to make it one that is to include affordable housing units. I think I was reading several different articles about how it would be several thousand affordable housing units. We need to be prioritizing our tenants and our families and making sure that every single person in this city has a place to live. So I would support, if we're going to rezone this area, then having all the block leaders, all the tenant leaders, all the PTA leaders, religious leaders, community board leaders at the table so we can make sure that the actual needs of that community are met. Not the needs of the real estate developer, not the needs of the guy who wants to make a ton of money off of a 47-story high rise, but the needs of the people who are going to be impacted by whatever is built there. So whenever we're doing rezoning, it's your voice that has to be at the decision-making table.
Thank you for your answer to that question. So my next question is something that is affecting, I live in Manhattan Valley and then that part of CD7. It's just something that's really important to our portion of the neighborhood. And that's this. Prior to the 2019 rent laws that passed in Albany, many landlords secured mortgages for buildings that fundamentally relied on aggressively deregulating rent-stabilized apartments and charging market rate rents to make the mortgages work. But once the 2019 rent laws were passed and changed the incentives, the apartments are more likely to remain rent stabilized, but some apartments are falling into disrepair, and more landlords owning them are starting to declare bankruptcy. We've seen this with properties owned, as you might have seen on some of the local news coverage by Isaac Kazir and the Emerald Equity Group on 107th Street. How would you build on programs like Neighborhood Pillars to ensure safe, habitable, and still rent stabilized housing?
Yeah, I mean, we need rent stabilized housing, right? We need to make sure that we're not increasing the prices. That's why we have so many vacancies in this city, because the prices go up and up and up. So rent stabilization is important, but we also need to make sure that we're providing the support so these buildings don't fall into disrepair. We need to make sure that we're providing support from the city and the state to make sure that our landlords aren't becoming landlords that have, leaks that don't go fixed or elevators that aren't working. It's really like, this is, I hear from people all the time about how they have to walk up, even though they're supposed to have an elevator, they have to walk up like 10, 12 flights because the building management is unreachable or just doesn't care because maybe they don't have the funds or the resources, or they're just a slumlord. So we need to prioritize our tenants. Housing is a human right. We know this. So we have to make sure that the people are provided housing and that when they're in that housing, they're being taken care of. And so this is stuff that we can work on in city council, but also to leverage our relationships with our colleagues and our counterparts in Albany. I've been endorsed by Senator Biaggi and Senator Rivera. We're announcing our endorsements from Assemblymember New and Senator Salazar coming up. These are relationships that I will use to make sure we're putting through laws that are looking out for our tenants and working with the other council members. There's 50 other council members that we can work on to make sure our landlords are getting the repairs done in their building. I can't tell you how many times I've called my landlord for myself and my neighbors, and they just don't have the resources, the time, or the care. And that's wrong. So we need to be putting through bills that are morally sound, so we're not falling into this area where landlords are filing for bankruptcy because of all of this.
Thank you for your answer to
Sorry, my
our.
dog is crawling on me. Sorry.
No worries. We love pets here at Westside Democrat.
Part of working from home.
Yeah, right. No, it's totally understandable. So my next question, these are quicker questions, or at least the next one is. The one after one is not. But would you have voted for the 2020-2021 fiscal year New York City Council budget? Why or why not?
The budget that we just had, yeah. So I would have voted no on that budget. There were a lot of flaws in it. You know, I am a big believer that the communities with the most resources are the safest, not necessarily the most police. I'm a big believer we need to be putting more money into our schools. We need to be putting money into our schools to make sure we have social workers in our schools to address the needs of students who have things going on in their home lives or their academic lives, and they need somebody who's there to help nurture them. We need to be making sure we're integrating our schools and that we're having classroom sizes that are going to give teachers the capability to reach every student. We need to make sure that we're putting money into our housing. We need to make sure we're putting money into programs that aren't going to mass incarcerate people, but actually rehabilitate people. I'm very open about, I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. By the grace of God, I've been sober for almost 10 years, but it's because I was given resources to help me get what I needed to survive this disease. So if we're incarcerating people for having an addiction, instead of getting them the treatment that they need, we're setting them up for a lifetime of repeat, instead of getting them back into the world. So I would have voted no on this budget because I think it continued to allow our police department, who's led by Commissioner Shea, who should resign yesterday, it gives them the capability to keep doing injustices when we need to have a budget that's truly equitable. And I just don't think this one was that. But I have hope because there's another budget before this new council is elected. And I have hope that we can get a budget that's one for the people. And then when I'm in office, I want to make sure that, like I talked about earlier, your voice at the table. This campaign and myself as a council member will be all about coalition building. I don't have the answers to everything. I'm not an expert on everything, and I'm not going to pretend to be. But how I'm going to be the best representative is by hearing the needs that each of you in the district have. So when I go in to vote on a budget, your voice and your needs are being heard.
Marty, it is all the time we have. Thank you so much.
That was a long answer to if I would have voted yes or no, but
that was a long answer, right? We thought it was a short question, but it was a long one and a thoughtful one. So thank you for all your thoughts, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, and please stay safe, everyone. And best of luck to my colleagues and friends who are up next. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Next, we'll be hearing from Shaun Abreu. Shaun lives down the street from me here in Manhattan Valley, and he's a tenants' rights lawyer. And you can give more of a background on yourself and whatever you'd like to talk about in your 3-minute opening remarks starting now.
Pablo, thank you so much. Westside Dems, good evening. Thank you so much for hosting. I know we're living in very difficult times right now, and the fact that we're able to focus on things beyond what's happening on our nation's capital, but also the racial injustice happening throughout our country. I'm very grateful to be here with you. I'm Shaun Abreu, and I'm running to represent the place I've known my whole life, my home, Council District 7, made up of working class families like mine whose experiences I largely share, to fight for stable housing, job and food security, and after school programs for our kids. Look, I am the son of Dominican immigrants, and I grew up on 161st Street in Washington Heights. I went from being evicted as a child to becoming a tenants' rights attorney, defending families like mine facing housing insecurity in housing court. I went from being held back in elementary school to graduating from Columbia University and Tulane Law School. But all of this happened either through a stroke of good fortune or good luck because of opportunity. After our family's eviction, my mother landed a job at Zabar's. I think some of you know about Zabar's. She began there as a cashier worker and then made her way up to working as a clerk, where she's been there for over 20 years. My father landed a job as a janitor, as a member of 32BJ at the Port Authority. And we've been living in the Upper West Side for nearly 2 decades. And of course, I spent my time every now and then in between Washington Heights and the Upper West Side. But Pablo, as I've said before, privately in discussions, working class families are struggling unlike we've ever seen, and the opportunities that helped us are hardly accessible to families today. The pandemic has caused our neighbors' lives. Students are falling behind, small businesses are drowning, evidenced by the vacant storefronts all over the Upper West Side, and historic job loss will result in an avalanche of evictions, which is also culminating in unprecedented levels of food insecurity. As a tenants' rights attorney and as a future council member, I look forward to championing free legal services for families and small businesses facing eviction, as well as economic relief, initiatives to combat food security and health inequities, and universal after-school and free broadband to address the academic achievement gap that our low-income students are facing. If these are things that you are deeply passionate about, then I am asking you to join me in this journey. Having the support of Westside Dems would mean the world to me and would go a long, long way to helping our campaign achieve its policy objectives in the City Council, which we believe aligns with the goals of Westside Dems. Again, thank you for having me, Westside Dems. I'm looking forward to additional questions.
All right, thank you very much, Shaun, for your statement. My first question, I believe you were here with us, so I'll give you the short version of it. Do you support the comprehensive planning framework that has been put forth in the City Council thus far?
I absolutely support comprehensive planning, and I also support the Morningside Heights Community Coalition rezoning plan as well. To go further, I think that it's important for us to upzone high opportunity neighborhoods. That is going to be very critical. We need to create density while also making sure that is contextual and that we don't have these luxury super talls that are also, not consistent with our neighborhood's needs and wants. But definitely, I think that there is a middle ground here for us to create density responsibly, while also making sure that we're not having luxury super talls getting out of hand.
Thank you, Shaun. My next question, since you tackled my first two all in one, is before the passage of 2019 rent laws, a number of landlords secured mortgages for buildings that relied on aggressively deregulating apartments and charging market rate rents to make their mortgages work. Now, following the 2019 rent laws, the apartments are more likely to remain rent stabilized, but some of the apartments are falling into disrepair, and more landlords that are owning them are starting to declare bankruptcy. We've seen this in our neighborhood with properties owned by Isaac Kazir and the Emerald Equity Group, who declared bankruptcy. He also was on the worst landlords list in 2020. So how would you build on programs like Neighborhood Pillars to ensure safe, habitable, rent-stabilized housing in New York City?
Yeah, well, after the new, I'm a tenant rights attorney, so I know, very intimately the implications of increasing, MCIs and IAIs, which landlords traditionally use as a mechanism to make apartments deregulated, right? But then, with the decision that came down a few months ago with Regina, now it's very hard now for tenants to go beyond the 4-year look-back period in order to, basically explain to their landlord that they fraudulently increased the rent. But to answer your broader question here, I wrote an op-ed in the New York Daily News last year, in 2019 of December, calling for rights of counsel to be expanded to include proactive litigation against landlords to ensure that HP actions are taken care of. These are actions that will require landlords to make repairs. And a lot of landlords don't act on orders because attorneys aren't bringing motions to compel or among other things. So I think we need to create enough carrots and sticks to make sure that landlords follow through on their obligation to make apartments habitable, which is a requirement under law. On top of that, I wrote another op-ed in the New York Daily News, which called for a viable path to rent forgiveness. And the truth is, we have to make sure that we're being pragmatic with our solutions. What I called for was making sure that landlords got some relief in order that tenants could be forgiven with their rent, right? And the goal was, let's give landlords some of their operating costs up front, and that would also include maintenance, by the way, and repairs. While it's not as a lump sum of money that they would be getting, right, if they receive the full rental amount, it's definitely something, much less But at the same time, tenants would be able to be forgiven with the rent. And we need to move forward on being creative on both sides. And so that's one of the things I'm championing. But again, like Marty said, I don't know all the answers, and I never pretend to know all the answers. And I'm going to be working with think tanks and people like-minded, like you, Pablo, who have a lot of ideas on housing policy, especially considering your background at the HCR.
Thank you, Shaun. This is just an obligatory mention. I am here in my personal capacity. And thank you for your answer. So my next question is on the budget. Would you have voted for the current fiscal year New York City Council budget? Why or why not?
I came out against it this past summer, soon after. I think that we have to be very, very intentional about where we devote our resources. When you compare the city's budget, in comparison to other budgets like our schools, social service agencies, you name it, it doesn't, combined, it doesn't make up the budget of the police department. And if we're really trying to get to the root causes of our society's, issues here, we need to make sure that we're making investment in housing, right? That we're making investment in important social services. And I think that if we take care of these other things, the root causes, then everything else will take care of itself. We don't need militarization of police, right? We need more fair accountability and more investment in other areas. And I think that you will see issues like crime go down.
Thank you for your answer. My next question is, how would you help meet NYCHA's capital funding needs? And please only reference measures the city can control instead of the state or federal government.
That's a very good question, Pablo. I think that we can, right away, impose a tax on luxury development. I think that would be one way to really bring some necessary resources to address capital repair issues. We need to get very creative, and tax implications are one way of doing that. And I think that the other thing we can also do is also increase property taxes to the extent the city can control it. The city there's a threshold of, I believe, 5% that they can do, and I think we should be able to increase that as much as possible to the highest income earners. I think that's going to be very important to, especially considering the budget deficits we're confronted with, and we have to get creative in that sense, Pablo.
Thank you for your answer to that question. We have about a minute left. So what measures would you pursue to enhance police accountability?
I love that you asked that question. The first thing we have to do is make sure that the CCRB, when it issues decisions, that they are absolutely binding. I will also work to implement the removal of the police commissioner's appointment powers to the Civilian Complaint Review Board, granting them to either the public advocate or the city council instead. And I also think that the city council can expand the class of actions that give rise to misconduct and discipline. I will also embrace our very own Comptroller Stringer's plan to remove the NYPD Office of Trials, which reviews the most serious CCRB cases from the police department jurisdiction. Its judges should not be appointed by the commissioner. I think that's fairly obvious. In the spirit of transparency akin to the repeal of 50A, I would support Senator Brian Benjamin's bill that would require New York City to disclose details of NYPD settlements. As taxpayers, I firmly believe that we have a right to know how our taxes are being spent. I would also work to ensure that we are holding the unions, which have a huge implications with respect to the disciplinary process, right? Disciplines aren't always held, in ways that you want them to be held. They're subject to collective bargaining agreements. And so we want to make sure that we're working with our next mayor, which I'm sure will be Scott, through the grace of God. And we're going to be working together to make sure that the next labor leader is actually doing the bidding of the community, while obviously making sure that we hold our officers accountable. And that's going to be a very huge undertaking, but I think we can do it.
We are unfortunately at time, so you just wrap up your sentence and then we'll.
I'm done, Pablo. I just want to say thank you to everyone for having me, having the support of Westside Dems, who would really mean the world. So I'm very grateful for all of you.
Thank you, Shaun, for your time and for your answers tonight. Really appreciate it. Next, we'll be going to, we have Dan Cohen with us. Thank you, Dan. Dan is he helps build affordable housing, and he's a state committee member for the 69th Assembly District. So, Dan, please introduce yourself and give your opening remarks when I set the timer to it, which is now.
Thank you, Westside Democrats. Thank you, Pablo, and congratulations on becoming an attorney. I just want to clarify that I don't develop affordable housing. I work for a not-for-profit that helps sponsor it. Nice to see you all tonight. I'm running for city council because I believe I have the most experience, energy, and ideas to help our community recover from this pandemic and grow anew. I've been a member of this club for 30 years. I joined the club, then formerly known as Community Free Democrats, when I graduated college in 1992, and I've been part of it ever since. While I have since migrated north to vote in 3 parks, it has been said that you never forget your first club. I am the elected state committeeman for the 69th Assembly District, and I was overwhelmingly supported by this club when I first ran in 2010 after Larry Hirsch stepped down from the position. I've been reelected 5 times since then with Westside Dem support, and I'm a founder of the Progressive Caucus of the state committee. I'm a lifelong resident of the Upper West Side, and I now for 50 years. And tonight I come before you to ask for your support in my campaign for city council. I grew up on West 99th Street in rent-regulated housing and attended PS 75 on West 96th Street. I now live on West 110th Street with my wife and our son Caleb, who is 8 years old and attends PS 452. As a proud New York City public school graduate and a public school parent serving on the school PTA, I have seen firsthand the struggles our schools face and why tackling them is so critical. Professionally, I've spent the past decade working for affordable housing not-for-profit organizations and for the past 7 years with a nonprofit housing partnership. Working in affordable housing, I have seen the urgency of the issue in the district and across the city. Under the mayor, the city has made a mess of affordable housing, in particular by not building in the area of greatest need low-income housing for people who make less than $40,000 a year. So I have proposed 1,000 new affordable units in the district on sites either owned or controlled by New York City. As a member of Community Board 9, I have advocated to create 200 units of affordable housing and a community arts center in Hamilton Heights, 300 units of senior housing in Manhattan Valley, and 500 units of affordable housing in Manhattanville. Balancing that need is making sure that we're not overwhelmed by luxury overdevelopment. We must protect tenants as well as carefully manage construction in our neighborhood, and to that end, I have refused to accept any money from real estate developers. As a board member of Columbus Amsterdam Business Improvement District, I also know the importance of supporting small local businesses, and I want to create a capital fund to help small companies start and restart as part of the COVID-19 recovery, with targeted investment in minority and women-owned businesses. Next year, virtually the entire city government is changing, and new leadership must hold the police accountable, advocate for structural change to foster racial equity and LGBTQ justice, and protect the most vulnerable among us. Ultimately, I believe that climate change is the biggest threat that we face as a city, a country, and a planet. I'm committed to making New York City the standard for responding to global warming, as it will touch on every aspect of our lives: housing, schools, transportation, everything. We cannot have climate justice without fundamental changes in the way that we operate. I would be very grateful, so grateful, Westside Democrats' endorsement, and I ask for your support. Thanks for taking the time to listen. Now I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. All right, Pablo, hit me.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for clarifying about your background. I really appreciate you doing that. So my first question, as I've asked Marty, as I've asked Shaun, do you support or oppose the current comprehensive planning proposal before the City Council?
I support it.
Great. That took 2 seconds. So my next question is about the Morningside Heights Community Coalition rezoning, MIH rezoning. Do you support or oppose that rezoning?
So I support it with the caveat that a lot of the affordable housing is going to actually come from a piece between 108th and 110th Street on Broadway, 2 sites that are underdeveloped right now. This community, the West Side, worked very hard to put zoning in place that would limit development to 145 feet tall. And the zoning that's currently proposed under the Morningside Heights rezoning could put up towers over 230 feet. So my proposal, and I've suggested this to the Morningside Heights Community Coalition, is that we actually keep the height still at 145 feet. And you can still actually get all of the housing in that. You have to build shorter and thicker towers on those sites between 108th and 110th, while still committing to building the affordable housing that the plan calls for. So yes, but with a slight caveat.
Thank you for your response. My next question is, prior to the 2019 rent laws, a number of landlords secured mortgages for buildings that relied on aggressively deregulating units and charging market rate rents instead to make the mortgages work. But following the 2019 rent laws, the apartments are more likely to remain rent stabilized. Some apartments are falling into disrepair, and more landlords owning them are starting to declare bankruptcy. We've seen this with the properties owned by Isaac Kazir and the Emerald Equity Group on 107th Street. They were on the worst landlords list and also now have declared bankruptcy as well. How would you build on programs like neighborhood pillars to ensure safe, habitable, rent-stabilized housing in New York City?
Well, so I want to start by saying, like, cry me a river for the speculative developers that were trying to extract value off the backs of tenants. And there was really, because now the plan that was put into place by the legislature really restricts what you can do in terms of overall building improvements and individual apartment improvements, because they don't want to raise the rents on those tenants. There really are two other options. If those buildings are going to be maintained, you either have to provide some tax incentives that reduce the tax burden, or you have to provide some grants to provide those improvements. But I don't want to give those out willy-nilly and sort of reward bad actors just because they happen to have a bunch of affordable housing tenants in their buildings. I want to see, prove it. Show me that you have a hardship. A lot of these developers own dozens of buildings, and they're doing just fine financially. So we should enforce the laws and make sure that those buildings are repaired and in good condition. And if there's a developer who's actually in financial distress and can prove that they need to have some assistance, I'd be willing to explore that too.
Great. Thank you for your answer to that question. My next question is, would you have voted for the 2020-2021 New York City Council budget? Why or why not?
I would not have voted for it, and I was clear about that when they were deciding it several months ago. One of the things that's come up by some of my colleagues have raised before is just where we allocate resources in this budget. 30 years ago, we had 500,000 felonies and we had 24,000 cops. In this past decade, we've had about 100,000 felonies and about 36,000 cops. That makes our police force 3 times the largest police force of anywhere in the country. Chicago is 12,000. That's the next biggest one. We could reduce the number of police officers while still maintaining a tight control on the crime that we have and reallocate some of those resources to where we desperately need: public education, transportation, affordable housing, mental health. And that's why I would have voted against that budget for that reason. I didn't think it went far enough for what we needed.
Thank you, Dan, for your response to that question. My next question is, how would you help meet NYCHA's capital funding needs? Please only reference measures the city can control instead of the state or federal government.
So NYCHA collectively across the entire city has 80 million square feet of undeveloped air rights. This current administration has proposed building luxury housing to help subsidize repairs on NYCHA campus. And honestly, that's just not going to do it. Even the city itself admits that it's only going to yield about $1 billion in total. And the problem that NYCHA is facing is over $40 billion. That's all with B's, 40 billion. So it would be a rounding error in terms of the repairs that they could make. What I instead propose is that we build affordable housing on a lot of those sites in close cooperation with the tenant organizations who are going to have to live there with any new developments that happen. And if necessary, talk about trying to work with tenants to move folks out of buildings that are in states of disrepair into new buildings on those sites, either repair the buildings that currently exist so that they can be put up to habitable standards, or if necessary, demolish them and build them anew. I don't think that some of those buildings have long outlasted their natural life. And it's kind of a Band-Aid on a much more gaping wound for us to try to repair it. Now, you asked a larger question, which is how can we repair NYCHA? We just don't have $40 billion lying around. I must have left it on the bus. So if we're actually going to make those kind of repairs, we're actually going to need federal assistance. Congressman Velasquez has proposed a $50 billion bill for public housing across the country. And there's also the Green New Deal for public housing with Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. And I'd like to see some of those come forward, because that's really where the money is going to come that'll make those repairs. In the meantime, in the short term, some of the work that we have underway is already making some progress, but we've got a long way to go before a lot of those residences are where they should be.
Thank you. And relatedly, we have a question here in the chat. We asked just for simplicity if everyone could use the Q&A function to submit questions, but we will take this question. Do you support or oppose the expansion of the RAD or PACT program and if just give a brief explainer for our audience, and that could, be a little wonky.
Sure. The RAD program and the PAC program are essentially two different names of roughly the same thing, which try to provide capital funding to repair NYCHA. The problem is that it shifts NYCHA out of Section 9, which is one category, into Section 8, which is another category of federal law. And it's not entirely clear, actually I'd say it is very clear, that the housing protections that are guaranteed under Section 9 are not as strong in Section 8. And even though in the near term, in the next 10 or 20 years, those residences will get some of the capital improvements they need to be repaired. And there's some positive examples of RAD having yielded positive improvements for residents. The real concern is that in a number of years, those residents will lose the protections they have to their public housing. And I don't want to sacrifice public housing in the future just to make repairs to it today. So no, I'm opposed to RAD as it stands.
Thank you.
Sure.
We talked a lot about housing, although we've also touched on other things, but I want to switch topics here a bit. The question we haven't gotten to from the candidates yet, which is, given that District 7 is majority Latino, what measures would you pursue to desegregate gifted and talented education? And further, do you support or oppose Mayor de Blasio's pause on middle school admission screens?
It's one of the few things that the mayor, I think, has done right on education. He's actually paused the screens, which I think is the right way to go. We should get rid of screens for elementary and middle school, and I would get rid of geographic screens for high schools, because I don't see any purpose beyond creating segregation across the school district. District 3 has undertaken a plan, along with District 15 in Brooklyn, to create a desegregated middle school, and it's actually yielding some positive results. Particularly Brooklyn's 15 is making real headway. And I'd want to see that expanded across the city. If we're going to be serious about this, we have to talk about desegregation in a real practical way. And that means removing the screens and encouraging students to be in a lottery across all of the schools across the districts so that they can get the education that they deserve, rather than ones they get stuck with, which often, particularly for poor and for children of color in the city, are inadequate.
With 10 seconds left, a quick question. Yes. Do you support continuing outdoor dining in open streets year-round?
Absolutely. I think it's wonderful. I think it's spectacular. The idea that we sort of reclaim the street spaces for ourselves has been marvelous, and I think it's really a wonderful experiment. Certainly, the open streets. I've seen it on Columbus and on Amsterdam, and that's been a wonderful experiment. And also the idea of some restaurants being able to expand their spaces. It's the least we can do after this pandemic, with so many have been so hurt.
All right, Dan, thank you so much for your answers and for your time. We really appreciate it.
And thank you, Westside Dems.
Next, we will hear from Corey Ortega. Sorry, Corey is a district leader in West Harlem, and he has done a number of roles, including as a leading staffer with the Black, Latino, Asian Caucus of the New York City Council. Corey, please, thank you for being here. Please just provide an opening statement in 3 minutes so we can all hear from you.
Sure. Hey, everyone. Thank you for having me. Westside Dems, Pablo, and my council candidate colleagues. I'm going to start with just basically 3 bullet points that will help me focus. My background, diversity, and organizer-in-chief. So background, I started as a tenant organizer, Lehman St. John's University, was also a daycare provider with the UFT with my mother, then eventually went to work for then Assemblyman Keith Wright, representing the West Harlem 70th Assembly District Part D. From there, went to the Democratic Party, helped establish a Democratic Club. From there, worked on a gazillion campaigns. From there, working with veteran organizations on a national scale, organizing, and then back locally on the city, preparing and advocating and lobbying for legislation. From there, eventually making it full circle back to the New York City Council's Black, Latino, Asian Caucus. So that's my experience. In terms of diversity, what I hope to see from this Democratic Club is that, and I don't think you're endorsing ranked choice voting, So what I hope to see is that this club will support a candidate that has diversity and can represent not only the needs of Manhattan Valley, but Hamilton Heights, West Harlem, and Washington Heights. There are a lot of different needs, and I've heard the questions that come up, MIH, rezoning, but there are also needs in other parts of the district, like shootings. I just had a shooting here on 134th Street before yesterday in Amsterdam. I had a shooting on 135th Street between Broadway and Riverside. And these are some of the concerns that I believe we need a candidate that can address the concerns of Manhattan Valley, West Harlem, Hamilton Heights, and Washington Heights. An organizer in chief. Some of the answers that I've heard, and I don't mean to give shade, but I'm a little tired. You can't answer things with wishful thinking. There are a lot of good candidates who are running for this position, but good intentions aren't good enough. And you need some hard responses. You can't answer a question with an op-ed. You can't answer a question relying on the relationships with other elected officials. If you're relying on another elected official, then maybe they should run for this position. And maybe you should sit this one out. An organizer in chief is basically, and you have a lot of district leaders. Imagine a city council member that has the know-how and the skill set of a district leader, but with the authority of a city council member and the budgetary and the legislative authority to execute that. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to transform this city council seat into an organizer in chief, organizing from block to block, not just West Harlem, but from Manhattan Valley all the way to the tip of 165th Street. I believe I have 2 seconds left, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Corey, for your opening statement. Now I'm going to begin asking questions. So my first question is about the rezoning plan between 110th and 125th Street for the Morningside Heights Community Coalition. Do you support or oppose the plan?
I would support it with 2 caveats. I believe Dan Cohen has given one. I support his position on that. Another position that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm the only city council candidate from District 7 that supports Intro 1572A, that would include an impact study, a racial impact study across the board in all rezonings, so that we can avoid what happened to District 10 and Washington Heights happening to us in Manhattan Valley, Hamilton Heights, and Washington Heights. And I would go a step further and ask all my council candidates to look up the bill and make a statement, put it out tomorrow, and support this bill, as it would affect our whole district.
Thank you, Corey, for your answer. My next question for you is on comprehensive planning. Do you support a 5-year process, the plan that's in the council right now for a 5-year process for comprehensive planning to affirmatively plan for land use needs, including affordable housing, and to align them with the capital budget?
So the short answer is yes, but I'm going to expand on that. The reason why district by district, block by block, rezoning the Euler process is broken, because you can't get a bird's eye view. And to add to that, we got to do away with member deference. Just blow that up. You have to make the decisions what's best for the district. And when you say, oh no, member deference, that means every city council hearing that you've ever had, any public feedback that you ever had, a testimony, is basically useless. You're basically saying all of that is out the window when one council member can make that decision. If you have a good rezoning plan back then, pre-ULURP reform, then make sure that all your colleagues can vote on it. But let me go a step further. As I said, the current ULURP process is micro. We need macro. And we need this ULURP reform. And it's funny, I've been talking about this, but then Corey Johnson came out with this. It is the right move. So then you can make decisions, not just block by block, not pegging one neighborhood or district against the other, but truly coming with a plan that can answer the demands of the neighborhood. On top of that, I don't know how much time I have, but please let me know. We have to fully fund community boards to have a planning manager that can give input on behalf of the whole community full time, so that we can have real input and say, yes, in the bigger scheme of the comprehensive 5-year plan, this is what we need in District 7. And then it could be considered and we can come up with a good plan.
Thank you. You still have 3 minutes and 50 seconds in answering all of the questions that are coming. So you still have plenty of time. So my next question, we're going to switch it up a little bit from what I had asked other candidates, just to keep it fresh. What opportunity do you see to expand select bus service in District 7?
Oh my God. So someone had asked me that. Hey, what's up, love? God bless you. Someone had asked me that question before, and I basically answered like this. If we have express trains from 96th Street down, that's the equivalent of an express bus select service for our community so that you can get to other places faster. So we know that the main strips in District 7, Amsterdam, Broadway, we can use that here in our district that would connect from Washington Heights all the way to Manhattan Valley. So yes, I would support select bus service because it would be needed. And I could just start with the tour. Let's add St. Nicholas Avenue coming from the tip of Washington Heights going down to Manhattan Valley. I just got a text. I apologize. I am in my car. So part of my spiel and what I actually do, organizer in chief, I was on 96th Street giving out helpful information with regards to the vaccine for seniors 75 and up, and then recently changed today, updated 65 and up. So I had to do that, get in the car, drive to my block, but if I would go into my building, I would lose reception. So I'm currently in my car right now. My apologies.
No worries. We're grateful for your time and that you're joining us tonight. My next question is, would you have voted for the 2020-2021 council budget? Why or why not?
So that's an easy answer, and I know my colleagues and I have given this answer. No, I would have voted no. The budget did not meet the needs of the people. Then, summer youth program had been cut from like 170 million down to, and playing games with, back to 100. NYPD, and this hashtag is very misleading. Defund NYPD. Defund NYPD really means refund social services. If there's a budget surplus in any agency, and it just so happened to be NYPD because it's never been touched, if there's a budget surplus that does not need to be met today, then you have to take those resources, that budget line allocation, and refund other more needful social services. And because of that, I could not in good conscience have voted yes for that budget.
All right, thank you for your response. My next question is, given that District 7 is majority Latino, what measures would you pursue to desegregate gifted and talented education? Do you support or oppose Mayor de Blasio's pause on middle school admission screens? Again, this is going to be a short answer. I agree with Dan Cohen. De Blasio has the right answer on this one. Yes, disaggregate. Yes, lottery. You have to mix it up because right now your zip code is determining your fate. I think I got that from Michael Blake, and that's not the case. So the crust of my platform is, before you can talk about equality, you have to rebalance inequities, and you have to then bring that up. 2 shout outs, love you too. You have to rebalance inequities to then say to those communities, and I'm not gonna lie, in certain parts of Manhattan Valley and the rest of District 7, who have been historically and traditionally starved of resources, before you can talk about equality, you have to rebalance those equities and refund social services to those parts. Okay, thank you for your response to that question. My next question is, how would you help meet NYCHA's capital funding needs? Please only reference measures that the city can control instead of the state or federal government. And since we got the question, I'll add, do you support the RAD Pact program for NYCHA? All right, so I'm going to answer this, and I'm going to throw some friendly shade at my colleague Dan Cohen. Dan Cohen and I agree on that same position. Screw RAD. If people lived, if you treated people that live in public housing like human beings, and you treated them as if they lived in luxury housing, you wouldn't say, hey, let me offset this responsibility to a management company and then take away your rights. That makes no sense. The other shade, well, that wasn't the shade. The shade is, Dan gave a good answer and he included federal government, but I'm just going to stick to city. And what I would say, different from all the candidates here, and I don't know, it's maybe if I have enough experience or a bit more experience than other candidates, we have to change home rule. And the home rule will allow city council as a body to then make decisions on the taxation and the financial fate of their legislation. Yeah, that's it for that one. Thank you. And with that, we are out of time. Corey, thank you for joining us. Do I get a closing statement? I'm sorry. I don't know if I got a closing statement. We're not doing one in this forum, but we did it for Comptroller. But thank you very much for for joining us and for answering our questions. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, next we will be joined by Stacy Lynch. Stacy is an attorney. She worked in youth and community development with our city mayor, among a range of other experiences. Stacy, we're looking forward to hearing from you. Please begin your 3-minute opening remarks now.
Thank you, Pablo, and thank you for inviting me here tonight. I had a speech already planned out and drafted, but earlier tonight I had a conversation with about 20 kids that live in the district, and they inspired me to change my entire remarks tonight. Let me start by saying it sounds like the club is very supportive of one Stacy in Georgia. Now's the opportunity to be supportive of another Stacy in District 7. When I had a conversation tonight with these kids, we were talking about Martin Luther King Jr., and I referenced his speech, "I Have a Dream." And, my father, Bill Lynch, he used to refer himself as an old country boy, someone from Mattituck, Long Island. And he came from Mattituck, Long Island to New York City on a dream. He was one of the most instrumental public and political figures in New York City, known as a coalition builder and also the campaign manager to the first African-American mayor, David N. Dinkins, as well as Hillary Clinton, Nelson Mandela, Jesse Jackson, and the list goes on and on. And so I wanted to say that his dream was also instilled in me, his daughter. When I graduated from, let's say, grade school, or let's start with nursery school, right? I attended nursery school in the district at a place called Mayfield Nursery. And from there, I went to Corpus Christi, also in the district, attended an after-school program called ACT. And from there, I went to Catholic school, then Hampton University in Virginia. And from there, I attended law school, Quinnipiac Law in Connecticut. I practiced entertainment law for roughly 10 years, but I was always drawn back to public service, whether it was standing up legal clinics, free legal clinics, or working with local community-based organizations. And it wasn't until 2013 when I joined Department of Youth and Community Development that I really realized how much I love public service. And after my time in the Department of Youth and Community Development, I joined the mayor's office, where I spearheaded initiatives such as an interagency task force to address COVID, as well as an all-girls basketball team across the city. I also worked with local, Pablo, is my time up? I feel like my time is up.
Yeah, can you just wrap up, if you can wrap up your thought, I would really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let me jump it down to the bottom of, I guess, my speech. I will be a hands-on council member, someone who knows how government works, who knows where the levels of power are and how to push them, and whose experience in government and beyond will allow my office to hit the ground running for the betterment of our residents. I look forward to our conversation tonight, and thank you.
Thank you, Stacy, so much for your time. So my first question, as it has been for most of the candidates so far, if not all, is New York City has a proposal to engage in 5-year comprehensive planning to affirmatively plan for land use needs, including affordable housing, and to align them with our capital budget. Do you support, and it's already been introduced in the city council, do you support or oppose this plan?
I wholeheartedly support this plan. As someone that has worked in city government for close to 10 years, I have seen firsthand the need of integration and coalition building. Thank you, Corey. Told me I need to adjust my camera. That's a brother. That's a real brother right there. I have seen the lack of integration, agency coalition building, and I think a comprehensive plan will definitely address the current state of the council and agencies and communities that work really in silos, right? And to Corey's point, the fact that there are just district plans and not a citywide plan just doesn't make any sense to me. And I think, we need to address that immediately.
Thank you for your response. My next question is, the Morningside Heights Community Coalition has put forth a rezoning plan between 110th and 125th Streets, with a down zone along the side streets, up zone along the avenues, and impose a mandatory inclusionary housing requirement in the rezoning area. Do you support or oppose this proposal?
I support the proposal, again, with the caveat that we work closely with communities and residents that live within the community. Again, as someone that worked for the de Blasio administration, community engagement, and I'll be honest, was lacking to a fair degree. And I think for zoning plans to really work, you need to include the community in this process. And so that is my charge as someone who is running for city council, and to my other colleagues across the city, that we actually update our zoning laws and be active in engaging our constituents and residents that live in the community.
Thank you for your response. My next question is about the about the 2021 council budget.
Yes.
Who voted for the most recent New York City Council budget? Why or why not?
Listen, I have to say this. I know as someone that was working in the administration at the time, it was a very tough decision for a lot of the council members who voted for the budget. But if I were council member at that time, and when I become council member, I would not vote for the budget as is. I think we need to be a little progressive and aggressive with how we really reallocate funding into social services. It's really all about reinvestment in our communities and not enforcement. If we reinvest in our communities, whether it's housing, education, healthcare, employment, I think we will see crime decrease, right? People have to recognize that, crime is really a public health issue. And I don't think that folks that commit crimes want to. I think they do it out of necessity because they need something, whether it is, money to pay for rent, or if they need to put food on their table. So, as a council member, I think one of the things that we need to discuss on a broader scale is what does criminal justice and what does the NYPD, what do they look like in terms of their role moving forward?
Great, thank you so much. So my next question is, what opportunity do you see to expand select bus service in District 7?
Well, transportation, when people talk about equity, they normally reference education, police reform, and other things. I think transportation should be included on that list. A select bus within this neighborhood, I believe is critical. It will help a lot of the working class families that are constantly, leaving their home and going to work and working long hours. So as a council member, I would be in full support of
Great, thank you so much. So
Pablo, we're going through these.
no, we're flying, so that's good, you know. Let me ask you a question I've had on my list, but haven't had the chance to ask anybody yet because
Uh-oh, Pablo.
I pre-prepared it, so I'm just we're getting through a lot of questions, and I want to ask this to a few people. Whose support have you earned so far that demonstrates the kind of coalition you'll bring to City Hall and 250 Broadway? Please describe everyday folks and not elected officials.
I love that question, Pablo. You know, I'm not into, and I love some of my colleagues and elected officials, but I believe that support really starts in the community. And so let me start by saying that I have the support of, you know, neighbors that live in my community, as well as community-based organizations that are very active in the community, ranging from the NAACP, Tenant Association presidents, and the list goes on and on and on. But my goal, to be honest with you, Pablo, is to really tap into a broader network. I recently received the endorsement of 21 and 21. Got you, Pablo. I recently received the endorsement of 21 and 21. And their goal, for those who are on the call, is to really elect 21 women to the council. And if and when elected, Pablo, I'll actually be the first woman to hold this seat. And so my goal within the next few months is to really build a coalition that includes community-based organizations, tenant residents, and others.
That's all the time we have, but Stacy, we're so grateful for your time and for the fact that you joined us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you for being with us. So our next candidate is Lena Melendez. She is an Uptown Manhattan activist. Lena, we'd love to hear from you and in your opening statement starting now.
Well, hi, my name is Lena Melendez. I was born and raised in the Heights, and I'm a housing activist and organizer. I'm a RENA board member. RENA is a tenant advocate group that helps tenants that have problems with landlords. I'm the president of my tenant association. I've done all sorts of different jobs. I currently hold a license in clinical social work. I've worked with populations like the homeless, persistently mentally ill, with serious issues with addiction and homelessness, teens, addicts, ADHD kids, families. I've also worked as an Uber driver. I've worked as a waitress. I've cleaned vacation homes. I've lived a working class life, and I believe working class people should have a seat at the table, not just from reading these statistics, right? I've lived it. I lived the experience of fighting for my succession rights after my mother passed away. I was heavily involved in the fight against the inward rezoning, and although it was outside of my district, I saw the growing interest of speculative investors creeping lower and lower downtown towards Washington Heights, and I experienced firsthand how the ULURP process goes, and I attended all the public hearings and community board meetings, and participated in civil disobedience, and I saw the injustice of the Uniform Land Use Review process. I found out the hard way about affordable housing and the MIH program. I was part of the fight for the 2019 rent laws. I lobbied for them, participated in civil disobedience alongside Jumaane Williams in Albany. I also became involved in the struggle to save small businesses and began speaking to small business owners about the challenges and the heartbreaks that they have faced. I have seen that New York City is losing its soul, and I want to be the one to fight for the soul of New York City.
Great. Thank you so much for your opening statement. Let me reset the clock. And so let me ask you my first question. So you mentioned the Inwood rezoning. So the New York City Council has a proposal to engage in 5-year comprehensive planning to affirmatively plan for land use needs, including affordable housing, and to align them with their capital budget. This would be an iterative process between communities and community boards, the City Council, the Department of City Planning, and another new entity that would be created to help with this. Do you support or oppose this proposal, which is already in the council?
Without having seen it, I can tell you that it's wrought with all kinds of problems, beginning with the fact that community boards are not representative of the demographics of the communities in which they live, they function. That the city agencies that are involved in land use are just, they're influenced by the politicians, which are influenced by the real estate industry. So just hearing from that question, I would have problems with it.
Thank you.
I think the whole land use process needs to be revamped.
Thank you for your response to that question. My next question, you mentioned MIH. So the Morningside Heights Community Coalition has put forth a rezoning plan between 110th and 125th Streets that would dowenzone along side streets, upzone along the avenues, and impose a mandatory inclusionary housing requirement in the rezoning area. Do you support or oppose this proposal?
I had a conversation with the current the District 7 community council member, Mark Levine, and he said that was a pretty good community-led rezoning. But that aside, I would tend to want to put a moratorium on any rezonings in the city. I'll tell you why. Because most of them that are slated for communities of color, and they're not community-led, and they are, again, having been left with a really bad taste in my mouth from that Inwood rezoning fight, and seeing how other folks around the city have fought against the rezonings, and the rezonings have gone through, just railroaded right on over the backs of the community members that fiercely opposed the rezoning. I would put a moratorium on rezonings until we can get that straight, until we can really pick it apart, and not just see. I'm also right now in the process of supporting that racial impact statement, right? But that's not enough, right? There's all sorts of moving parts in this, and we need to really take a look at those moving parts and start to dismantle the systemic racism inherent in it.
Thank you for your response. So my next question for you, going down a little bit of my list, would you have voted for the 2020-2021, that is to say the current fiscal year New York City Council budget? Why or why not?
2021, no, didn't meet the needs of the city. One such example was that the police was not defunded. The money was just shifted over to schools, and it did not, we don't need police in our schools. That is that gives us a direct school to jail pipeline. So yeah, that was one of the main issues that I had with that. Other than that, we need to ensure that we need to address the issues that force poor folks to commit crimes of poverty. If we put monies towards mental health, towards housing our homeless folks, to job training, the education system, all of those things are the things that will keep us safe.
Since you were, I think, the first of our candidates to expressly support defunding the police, of the $5.8 to $6 billion that we spend every year on the police, what would you say is the right amount, in your view, to defund by?
I would have to say I'm not sure about that. But I do want to say that I don't think that they need to have like these super military grade chemicals and riot gear and all of that to be used for the police to be using that stuff on its citizens. I was down in more than one Black Lives Matter march, and I saw the destruction, and it's out of hand. It's just out of hand. I don't know by how much we need to defund, but I know that whatever we take, right, we have the police, we're asking them to do too many things. I think that we need to take some of those things off their hands, right? Things that and put them into the hands of people that are properly trained, that are professionals, social workers, EMTs, mobile crisis units, and away from the police. It's too much for them. Police are committing suicide. They're having a problem doing everything that's loaded up on them. So it goes both ways. It's not just, oh, I'm calling for defunding the police. Let's help them, right? To take some of those things off of the table. They are not prepared to do all of that. They're terrible at de-escalating situations. You know, they should be called for, you know, for for mental health crises, like somebody that's having a psychological break. We don't need the police to be answering that call. We need a mobile crisis unit to be answering that call, and maybe police backup, but not as a first responder.
Thank you, Lena. And that is all the time we have. We really appreciate you being with us tonight. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we will have, we have 3 more candidates left. So thanks to everyone who's still with us. Next, we have Miguel Estrella. He is a community activist in Upper Manhattan and has run for office before. So good to get his insight, and you can begin, Miguel. Are you with us? You can begin. I don't see him here.
Did he assign his time to one of us?
I did assign a time to him, but let me see if we have another one of our candidates here, just in case. So
Luis Tejada, you forgot me.
Let me see.
Ah, there he is. I thought he was giving his time to another candidate.
I'm here since 7 o'clock.
Well,
everybody.
Thank you for being with us. Since you're here with us, we'll go to you. And I know we're running late for everybody, so I appreciate everybody's patience so far. We're grateful for you joining us, and here are 3 minutes to give your opening statement, which can start right now.
I thank you for inviting me, and thank you the Westside Democrat to have this opportunity for the candidates. I just want to say that I came from a city in Dominican Republic, the Mirabal sister town, and I grew up in the city where during the dictatorship of Trujillo from 1930 to 1960, we were attacked by those political. But we were attacked by especially my family. The 3 members of my family, the uncles, that were killed by Trujillo dictatorship. One of them in the electrical seats. And also the Mirabal sisters, 3 sisters that were killed in 1960, November 25th by the dictatorship. So I grew up in the city where we see how the dictatorship were killing our members of the family and revolutionary people in that time. When I become a student in high school, I become a student leaders in the Capitol. Also, I work for I was a leader in the national, one of the largest national union in the Dominican Republic. In 1985, I decided to come to New York. Here, after I graduated from college in Dominica as an electric engineer, when I came here to the city, I started working as a taxi driver, then as a superintendent. I went to City College in 1994. I started as a substitute teacher as PS 75, where my 3 children, they went to that school from kindergarten to F grade. And then they went to Beacon High School, which one is one of the best school in the city, high school best in the city, in the New York City education system. In 2001, I decided to found the community-based organization, Miraba Sister Community Center, because I identified that many of our residents, especially the immigrants, Latino in Washington Heights and Upper West Side, from Upper West Side to Hamilton Heights, they were suffering because the landlord abuses. For more than 2 decades, I've been organizing tenants in all Washington Heights, including the Bronx, more than 200 tenant associations. We part of the different coalition in the city, co-founders. So, for example, the Coalition to Language Access that we fought in 2008 in front of Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in order to provide translation services for the immigrants, because we had a lot of problems there. More than 70% of the people, they didn't have access to the language access to that hospital, and they were suffering. People died in the emergency room at that time. We also we were part of the Coalition to Preserve the Community, the Coalition to Fight Against the Columbia Expansion Plan 197C, along with...
We are at time, so if you could just give your last, finish your sentence, please, and then we'll start asking you questions.
Okay, my background is working for the unions, working to preserve affordable housing, working as a high school teacher and teaching in college, also teaching, working with the youth. But the most important is my half of my life, I've been working and fighting for people's rights, not only in Dominica, but here in New York City.
Thank you so much for your response and sharing your experience. My first question, this has been one I've been wanting to ask more of the candidates who've been coming on, and I was hoping to ask everybody this, but I'm going to ask you, whose support have you earned so far that demonstrates the kind of coalition you'll bring to City Hall and to 250 Broadway? Please describe everyday people and not elected officials.
I have the support from the people, and I support the people. I think it's one of the coalition, for example, that really is fighting back rezoning landlords here is not Manhattan, not for sale. I think this is a great coalition, including another coalitions in the city, Tenant Housing Council with Nellie Bailey. I remember that. Also, Area Rent Reform, RGB Coalition, NYC Stabilizing Coalition. So many coalitions they've been creating in New York City. But I think it is important to all the activists, including Ortega, Lena, and others tenant leaders in the neighborhood, that we can create a coalition in Upper Manhattan in order to stop landlord abuses, in order to stop the developers that they want to take over our neighborhood based on the fake arguments that they're going to bring affordable housing for our people. We know that it's not true, because we know what's going on with the small business, that they're closing, that we're losing the jobs. So we have to be together in order to preserve our community And the best way is to create a coalition. Even if I've been not elected as a city council, if some of my colleagues, they can be elected. So we have to continue this fight in order to preserve our neighborhood for all the ethnics. So I'm not talking about the Latinos. I said we have Afro-Americans, we have white people, even we are majority, it doesn't matter. We are a working class, and this is very important for us to continue working together to preserve the characters of our community, the shape of the buildings, and the very important things is that we are from different backgrounds, and this is the most diverse community that we have in the city of New York.
Thank you, Luis, for your answer. My next question is, the city has a proposal to engage in 5-year comprehensive planning to affirmatively plan for land use needs, including affordable housing, and to align them with their capital budget. And this would be a process that goes back and forth between the community boards, between city planning, the New York City Council, and a new body that will be created for this purpose. Do you support or oppose this proposal?
Let me tell you right away, man. I'm agree with Lena. I'm very skeptical about that. So I think we have to review that. We have to see, because we don't trust too much about the sort of rezoning. We have to postpone this one until we get to the city hall, because we're going to have 35 new tenants in city hall. If we can have 35 new tenants, progressive tenants, city council I'm talking about, progressive tenants, I think we can change definitely the whole sense of this of this plan. But we have to hold this one until we get there.
Thank you for your response. My next question is, would you have voted for the 2020-2021 New York City Council budget? Why or why not?
Definitely not. Definitely not. We don't trust in this people right now in City Hall at all, because we know that this budget it's not part of it doesn't represent the needs of the community that other candidates say already. So I think it's important, for example, to put more money in after school program. As a father of 3 very successful children, as a teacher in middle school and high school, in college, I think it is one part of the program on the educational process that is very important to develop the ability of the students, of our children, is to have to put those money to put part of the money on the after school program, because between during the time of the regular class, after the after school program is very important, because it's the only chance that the students have the opportunity to be creative, to be themselves. So as soon as they develop this ability, like piano, music, painting, sports, they're going to be more confident on themselves, and they're going to be more productive in the school, in the regular class. So I believe in the after school program, because it's the only way that our children can be themselves. Because in the regular program, it's part of the whole package. So it means that same language, same mathematics, same for everybody. But in the after school program, it's the best chance for them to find themselves. And then as soon as they find themselves, they're going to be better citizens in our neighborhood, and they're going to find the way that they want to develop in the future life. I think this is one part of this. I think it's very important to put more money in the budget. Also, defund the police. I don't think it's a good idea. I have many nephew friends that they are police officer, and they're very kind person. They're very nice. They're very educated. So I think it's that money should be used to reform the base of the police education. So we have to make some deep changes in the police department in order to approach them to the citizens. So defunding the police is like you're defunding some workers in any factory or any store or whatever. So, but we have to go close to the police department and the mayor to see, hey, what are we gonna do with this police force? We have to do something in order to connect them with the community and to let them know that they are there to preserve the community, to preserve the relationship. Because you know what happening now with all the protests around the city, because they are connected to Donald Trump. So some of the leaders of the police department, they respond to the political fears of Donald Trump and the Republicans. So we don't want that. So we have to do something inside the police department. But we need the police in the street, you know, defending the people, saving the life of the people, including in case of any attack for the terrorists, we need them very well prepared. So I think it's I vote definitely no. We want to wait until next year to see what happens with the next 35 new members in City Hall.
We are at time. Thank you for your thoughts and for your answer to our questions. We really appreciate it, Luis. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. Now, unless we hear from Miguel, we will be with our last candidate for the night, Maria Ordonez. Maria is a tenant organizer with 3333 Broadway, one of the large complexes in West Harlem. And she's also Ecuatoriana, like me. So, you know, there we have something in common. So, Maria, thank you for joining us. And please begin with 3 minutes of opening remarks.
Thank you, Pablo. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, West Side Democrats, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Maria Ordonez, and I'm running for City Council in District 7. That is part of Washington Heights, West Harlem, and part of the Upper West Side. I was born and raised in West Harlem, you know, and specifically in 3333 Broadway, where I've organized for tenants' rights, for Green New Deal, for Medicare for All, and all across the district. You know, we fought for these issues, these values, and we've seen that people care about these, and people are mobilized to these progressive values. And I'm running because, you know, it's time that we represent the working class in City Hall. You know, for far too long, the working class has gone unheard and their struggles have gone ignored. And it's time that we have a seat at the table at City Hall. You know, I'm 21 years old and I'm the youngest woman to be running for office in the city of New York. And people thought that I was crazy to run for office. But, you know, since declaring almost a year ago, we've built a movement. You know, we've met matching funds and we have maxed out on matching funds. So we have $190,000 to spend until the primary. And, you know, I come from movement politics. I come from the Bernie 2020 presidential campaign. And one of the things that, you know, I found after organizing for Bernie Sanders was that we have to fight in local politics like a movement. Through Bernie Sanders, we mobilized so many working class New Yorkers across Congressional District 13 for tuition-free college, for Medicare for All, for a Green New Deal, and all these things that we can fight for at a local level. And I also ran for delegate in Congressional District 13, and I got over 22,000 votes and became one of the youngest presidential delegates in the congressional district in the state of New York. I'm also a county committee member in my community. And, you know, I've shown that people want to see me in office. People want to elect a young woman of color into office. And, you know, we're building this movement that includes so many people that have never been involved in politics before, people who've never donated before, people who've never thought they would go in phone bank for anyone. But we're seeing a movement every single corner of this district. And I'm ready to fight and bring this movement to City Hall, to fight for truly affordable housing, for a Green New Deal for the city of New York, to fully fund our schools, and for just recovery from COVID-19. So that we can support our small businesses, we can support the people in our district, and no matter where you come from, you have access to healthcare, you have access to coronavirus vaccination, testing, and, you know, together, I believe that we can build this movement. And, you know, I believe that we will elect a person of color, especially a young woman of color, into office. And it's time for this change. And I see a vision where we have a City Hall that truly speaks to District 7. Thank you. And I look forward to answering all of your questions.
Thank you for your opening statement. Now resetting the clock for our minutes of questions. So our first question is, the Morningside Heights Community Coalition has put forward a rezoning plan between 110th and 125th Streets that would downzone along the side streets, upzone along the avenues, and impose a mandatory inclusionary housing requirement in the rezoning area. Do you support or oppose this proposal?
So I think the number one thing we have to do is, you know, a lot of respect for the work that they do. I think that we need to have more town halls, and we need to talk to people in NYCHA. We need to talk to the people who live in the community and fully understand if this is a process that you know, we want to move forward. You know, I am not a fan of the inclusionary housing program, so I think that we need to propose a plan that will actually secure and guarantee truly affordable housing. And, you know, oftentimes we're hit with zoning being a negative word, and, you know, that's going to affect our communities. But I believe that, you know, Morningside Heights has been an area that, you know, we do need to ensure that we have regulations in place so we can ensure affordable housing for the area, but it needs to be done with the community to ensure that their voices are heard and they're part of the decision-making process, especially people of color, so that we co-govern with them and they're part of this process.
Thank you for your response. My next question is, you know, you mentioned NYCHA. How would you meet NYCHA's capital funding needs? And please only reference measures the city can control instead of the state or federal government.
Absolutely. So the first and foremost thing that I believe that we can do to fund NYCHA is to defund the NYPD. You know, too much money is going into the NYPD, and we need to take at least $1 billion of the NYPD and reallocate it into NYCHA so that we can have, you know, people who no longer are living in mold, people who are no longer facing no hot water, no heat. And, you know, not just this, but we need to, you know, also look through our city departments, do an analysis across the city of the different budgets across the different city departments, and look at where we are, you know, putting our money, and if this money is actually, you know, being used correctly, if this money is actually being used efficiently. And if it's not, then it should go to the people. It should go to NYCHA. It should go to these places where people are living, and so to ensure they have a dignified place to live and, you know, can thrive in their communities.
All right, thank you for your response. My next question is, so you mentioned the NYPD. What measures would you pursue to enhance police accountability?
Okay, so number one, we need to take you know, police out of schools. We need to take police out of hospitals, and we need to ensure that what we have in schools are at least one union nurse. That we you know, reduce the amount of you know, army weaponry that the police has, because it's not okay that they have so much weapons. And, you know, we are New Yorkers, and we are living in a city where we're just trying to survive and live and work. There's no reason why we need to be targeted for the color of our skin. There's no reason why we need to be criminalized for who we are. You know, growing up in West Harlem, you know, I know what it means to see the police just standing in the corner for 24 hours because they think that we're criminals, because we're Latinos, we're Black, we're, you know, we're Hispanic. So, you know, we need to reduce, you know, the weapons they have. We need to defund the NYPD. We need to take police out of schools and hospitals, and we need to ensure that who is responding to mental health issues are social workers. Who is responding to these basic necessities of our communities are, you know, the hospitals, are the social workers, are the people in our schools. But we're not attacking or criminalizing people for the color of their skin.
Thank you for your response. My next question, one I haven't asked in a few over the course of the last few candidates, but I want to bring it back. Prior to the passage of the 2019 rent laws, a number of landlords secured mortgages for buildings that relied on aggressively deregulating apartments and charging market rate rents to make the mortgages work. Now, after the rent laws were passed, or changed, the apartments are more likely to remain rent stabilized, but some apartments are falling into disrepair, and more landlords owning them are starting to declare bankruptcy. We see this with the properties owned by Isaac Kazir and the Emerald Equity Group, who were on the worst landlord list and now have declared bankruptcy on those same properties, which are on 107th Street here in Manhattan Valley. How would you build on programs like Neighborhood Pillars to ensure safe, habitable, and rent-stabilized housing in New York City?
Yeah, so the first thing that we need to do is sit down with the tenants. I feel like too often we have these programs and they're done from top to bottom. We're talking to corporations, we're talking to landlords, we're talking to elected officials, but we're not talking to the people. We need to understand, where people are at, what income looks like, and make that affordable for them. Ensure that that affordability is for that person and that income. It does not come from an average income of it's an average of $50,000, and it based on a zip code, like area median income. It's about affordable to that individual. And to your point about how to create, programming to ensure an affordable housing, first and foremost, we need to ensure that when we create contracts of people, regulations about how affordable the apartments have to be are there. Secure that, if we are going to invest in this landlord, they're going to invest in the people. We're not just giving money to private landlords, private developers, so they just, create, a profit. They create market, apartments, and they just profit off tenants. It's time that we end that. It's time that, it's not about profiting off people. It's about ensuring that every tenant has a place to live. And if we're going to put money into this, we need to ensure that it's 100% affordable, that we have a system like we had in 33 Broadway, where we have Mitchell Lama, that ensures affordability for working class tenants, and not something that, after a while you maybe rent stabilize or go to market rate, but we are actually doing truly affordable housing. And that comes from the ground up, having town halls, talking to people, building with coalition partners, grassroots organizers in the district, and ensuring that that can happen.
Thank you for your response. My next question is, in light of the fact that District 7 is majority Latino, what measures would you pursue to desegregate gifted and talented education? And do you support or oppose Mayor de Blasio's pause on middle school admission screens?
Yeah, so I think that we need to eliminate all testing. So SAT testing, and any and all testing in schools. Testing is not a way to measure a student's ability or IQ level or how successful you will be. There are people who don't finish college and they end up doing wonderful things in the world. People who don't finish high school end up doing amazing things, more things than people who have a graduate degree or I have 22 seconds. So, what we have to do is fully fund our schools. We need to ensure that every single student has new textbooks, no matter their zip code. We need to have PTA funding that functions in school districts. So we fully fund every school, and not one school is more funded than another. So they have after school programs, the essential textbooks that they need. We're teaching the right history, and every single student has access to preparation so that they can be successful, and ultimately also have a jobs program so that when you come out of a public school, you have access to a union job, you have access to success. And in a city like New York, a job can truly make the difference. So ensuring that is in place, not just in wealthier neighborhoods, will be important.
Thank you. That's all the time we have. Thank you, Maria, for the time you made and for joining us tonight. That will do it for us with tonight's Council District 7 Forum. If you've been with us since the beginning with the City Comptroller Forum, you are a champion. We're really grateful for you and for your civic dedication and commitment. Please know that this primary will be held on Tuesday, June 22nd, and petitioning will be starting in a little over a month. So there's, and you can, get involved in any of these campaigns if they struck an interest in you. And of course, you'll have a chance to get involved leading up to Election Day and then to vote. So as a Council District 7 resident, this helped me think about who I want to vote for to be my next council member. And I hope it helped all of you in Council District 7 and beyond as well. So my name is Pablo Zevallos. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great night.